everyone to today's our social system mapping sumApp tech talk session for today, July 27th, 2020. You can hear we've got some more people coming in. Your host today is just me. Tim had an errand, he had a thing he had to do, and then there's Kara, who is always helping with technical stuff and plunking links into the chat. Today is just the third session of our monthly series of sessions, which is our Tech Talk. We have on the second Mondays, we have an introductory on-ramp session. Next month, it will be Jenny Mulholland Bears will share the Richmond Outdoors Coalition map. On the third Monday of every month, we have a deep dive conversation, and on August 17th, that will be talking about pairing up human systems dynamics models and methods with social system mapping with Lisa Negstad. And then today is the third one, which is Tech Talk, various approaches to incorporating people and organizations in a map. So just to point out, I think for most of you, you're familiar with mapping and sumApp and Kumu, but if you're brand new to this, really the session that you're going to get the most out of is the intro-level on-ramp session where we share a map and we get your basic introductory questions answered. The second two sessions are really aimed at practitioners who are deepening their practice in one way or another, or at least have got the basics down. And so I just want to point out that the Tech Talk today, if you're new to this, might be just a little bit over your head, but we love having you. And you're welcome to stick around, and we hope you do. But just know that there might be a technical term or two that isn't clear to you, and just sort of maybe relax into that and know that it will become clear over time. And if you have not ever been to one of these sessions, I just want to point out that we have a whole wealth of them. Lots of previous sessions. Every third one shares a map. So I would encourage you to go into those recordings. Kara's putting a link to the recording in the chat right now, hopefully. And in those sessions, you'll see a whole range of various social system maps that people have made. So that will help you, really help you get introduced. Also, if you are trying to do something and you get stuck or confused, or you just need someone to help you think through something, I have office hours every week on Thursday evening, 5 to 5:30 p.m. Central. So please feel free to just jump in to office hours via my Slack, or my Zoom link, which will be in Slack. I'll also cancel in Slack if I need to. And if you're not in our Zoom team or in our Slack team, Kara will put the invitation to that in the chat right now. Today's agenda, it's fairly basic. We're doing the greetings and agenda review right now, and in a minute we'll have chat introductions. Then I'll talk a little bit about the context and challenges of mapping people and organizations in a single map. There are basically 4 approaches that you can use with using sumApp and Kumu. I'll walk you through them, not in great technical depth, but just sort of give you an overview of what the options are and what the pros and cons of each option is. Then we'll do question and answer. We'll wrap up and close. And for those of you who are new to this, what we usually do is we have, stop sharing. The session goes, the formal session goes for an hour. So we get to the top of the hour and we'll stop and thank everybody who joined us and give you a greeting to go on your way for the day. But if you want to stick around for more informal chat, just ask more questions about what we talked about or bring up something totally different related to social system mapping, I will stick around and Kara will stick around for an extra half an hour. So when we get to that closing, just stay online through the closing and then hang out and chat with us if you want to. Hi, Jim. Okay. And so, and I think Kara put today's agenda. If you want that, there's links attached to it, but don't worry about saving links. If you want to walk through something with me. The link, you can use the link, but we will also follow up, send you a follow-up email with all the links. So if you just want to sit and listen, don't worry about missing out on anything. Okay, this is a tech session. So when we talk about mapping people and organizations, I think there's that in and of itself can be a really dense, sort of philosophically and conceptually dense conversation. For today, I'm just gonna say a couple things, and then, but mostly we're gonna focus not on the why, but on the how, the various possible hows, and the challenges of the various possible hows. But in a network, the why is generally, as Ryan said at the beginning, it's just kind of a constant topic of some networks are clearly designed to be organizational, networks of organizations, such as, municipal agencies and nonprofits and community, various advocacy groups and governmental groups and schools. Some are really conceived of as networks of individuals, but in any case, individuals become organizations, or they become teams, or they become work pods. And organizations, if you have organizations, often, especially if they're well-resourced organizations, can have sort of an outsized impact in a network because of if they're funders, they have a whole lot of impact. So on the one hand, you can say it's about the organizational power or dynamics or whether or not they're collaborating. And then on the other hand, you can see that organizations are just collectives of individuals, and how well an organization collaborates with other organizations and functions is the product of the collaborative capacities and the individuals within the organizations. So, and the work of a network is done by individuals. I mean, even if organizations are funding it, it's individuals who are actually doing the work. And if you have, for instance, if you have an influential CEO, for example, or leader of an organization that in an organization that has a lot of collaborative relationships, if that person moves to another organization within the same sort of ecosystem, odds are good that a lot of those relationships will go with that person. So suddenly your organization is going to structurally function a lot differently in a network. And if you're only mapping organizations, you're going to miss out on that. So there's just a whole lot of reasons to do both. But the challenge of doing both is that, but there are challenges to doing both. Because, for instance, if all you're doing is saying, I just want some dots and some lines, and I don't care if I have any more information about those dots or if I have any more information about those lines, you can just go ahead and say, are you an organization or a person? And it's fine. But if you want more information about the dots and about the lines, you end up having a situation where if you're doing a survey, I'm sorry, I'm not pausing for the rest of you. I'm doing my being spun up thing, and I'm afraid that we're not going to get it all, fit it all in. So I'm going to just try and march through it, and then hopefully we can connect a little after. Because we've somehow gotten about 10 minutes later than I thought we'd be at this point. So there's the issue of the surveys and making the surveys relevant to persons versus making surveys relevant to organizations, because persons have different dimensions than organizations, such as gender pronouns or race or age or where they live, or skill sets. And organizations have things more like, annual income or number of employees, those, organizational mission. Those are really different sets of dimensions. And what we see when, and so in an ideal world, you'd have two different surveys, one for people and one for organizations. And then there's the question of the relationships. So if you're mapping people to people and you've got several, like ranking of how strongly are you related in person to person, that's usually said one way. If you've got relationships from organizations to organizations, those are different kinds of relationships than person to person relationships. So organizations, it might be that one organization funds another organization, or it might be that an organization provides services to another organization. And those are dynamics of relationships that don't generally exist from person to person relationships. So there's the need for 2 separate surveys if you want to get, you know, detailed and analytical. And then there's the need for 2 for person to person connection questions, for organization to organization connection questions. And then there's another dynamic of relationship in that kind of a network, if you're mapping people and organizations, where you might want to know about the relationships of people to organizations, of individuals. So I might be on the board of that organization, or I might be the founder of that organization, or I might be a volunteer there, or a staff there, or I might be a patient there, or a student there. So, that means in an ideal world, technically, or data-wise, you'd want 2 surveys and 3 different sets of connection questions. And I have learned to articulate these and put these in categories, because every time I've done a map where I thought we were going to give them what they wanted, I discovered, oh, I didn't think of this piece, or oh, I didn't think of that piece until we got into it, and then discovered, oh, actually, this is really complex what they're asking for, if we're going to do it the way is often just sort of implicitly in people's heads. So I'm going to show you. So there's Kara is probably putting a link to, I'm going to share my screen for a moment. And I apologize for getting sped up. I know it's not, it happens. Okay, so we put this in the knowledge base. So this is basically a summary of what I'm going to walk you through. And there's a Miro board in here. If you click on the board, and then you can zoom in and out, or you don't have to do this, I'll walk you through it, but you can have it for future reference. So this might be helpful for those of you who are trying to talk with your clients about the pros and cons of the different approaches. So just at a very high level, there are 4 approaches, and they sort of increase in complexity of the data that you can gather and represent. And the first one is to just do a single generic survey that kind of fits for everyone, or, you know, whether that's generic enough that you can answer it as an individual, or you can answer it as an organization. The second one is to make a list of the organizations in the network in a checkbox question in sumApp. And then when you put the data into Kumu, cluster on the organizations. So you'll get organization nodes and people nodes doing that. The other one is to do that and have a second map, and I'll talk about that in a minute, where you can add information about the organizations into the nodes. And then the last one is to use the sumApp dual elements feature, which basically combines all those kinds of data sets into one interface that you can then map. So the first 3 you can do in one project in a tier 2 account. So those are pretty affordable, and they're technically, the first 2 are technically fairly simple. The third option just takes understanding Kumu a little bit, and then it's fairly simple. And the fourth one is technically the easiest, but the more expensive one, because it requires 2 projects in a tier 4 account. So I'm gonna stop sharing my screen for a second. If you've got it, you can walk along. But I'm just gonna talk a little bit. Sorry. I am doing my hyper aware thing where I'm actually really aware of how sped up I am. I'm trying to like unspeed myself up, but I can tell by the way I'm talking, I'm not. Okay, so in terms of the first approach, there are a number of our customers who use this first approach, and it works. And if you're just sort of, if your community is just beginning to do this kind of work, and just having anything mapped is really great and exciting to them, this is perfectly adequate. The shortcomings of it is that, again, you're gonna want to try and be relatively generic, both in terms of your survey questions and in terms of your connection questions. So you can't say like, I've known this person for X amount of years, because at the organizational level, no one can answer that question. So, you know, it might be rarely, occasionally, frequently, or a little bit, a medium amount, a lot, but relatively generic terms for the relationship questions. There's no way you'll be able to differentiate between the relationships between people to people, orgs to orgs, and people to orgs. And and those are not big deals, I don't think. The thing that gets a little bit challenging or confusing in a map is that often people, when they're reading the survey, they're not entirely sure, that they'll get confused about, am I answering this as me, or am I answering this as an organization? And some people will say, well, I want me to be on the map, but I also want my organization to be on the map as a separate node. And then that person, so this is a little bit of terminology that we came up with when we were designing dual elements, is we call that person an org rep. So I'm going to use the words org rep. And an org rep is a person who is both a person in the network and is going to represent the organization, is going to answer the organizational survey on behalf of the whole organization. One of the fundamental assumptions we made was that it would be ridiculous for us to try and crowdsource the organization data by having everybody in the organization respond to that. I've heard of somebody doing that kind of approach in a context where it was meaningful and relevant, but generally speaking, I think you can just pick somebody who knows the organization fairly well and say, please do this survey. But so the people, if there's an org rep in the net, and you will probably have a number of org reps, they'll either have to do the survey twice, one as themselves and one as their organization. And then they'll be keeping track of two separate sumApp links, which some of them will do. But what often happens is that, so this weekend I was looking at a bunch of maps. I can't share any, which is too bad because they're all private. But I was looking at some maps of people who have taken this approach. And what I ended up seeing was that it would be like, there'd be Christine Capra greater than the sun. I would sort of make myself a mushed person org. And then Tim would make himself a mushed person org. And then there would be like, Kara would make herself a mushed person org. So we would have 3 individuals from that organization all putting the organization in their name, but there would be no node for the organization itself. So there'd be no way of actually looking at the map and seeing, okay, this organization has 10 people who are attached to it, and this organization has 3, and this one is just an org and doesn't have any, and these are just people. You can't visually distinguish because you don't have separate nodes for the orgs and the people. So those are the sort of the drawbacks of that first approach. But like I said, it's especially if you're, it may be that you just don't need anything more than that. And I wouldn't say don't do a map because I think a map is always a useful thing just conceptually in terms of helping people start to think about relationships. So, but that's the simplest approach, and that's kind of the one that people were mostly using in the beginning. And I'm just going to check. So Jim, you said someone who can hold the person or view simultaneously. That's like the org rep, is I think what you're referring to. Okay. And then Laura, the first approach, can you ask more specific survey questions? Well, that's a really smart idea. And you could do that. But the thing is, it's clearer to you what's going on when you're doing this stuff than it is to most of the people in your network. And Tim and I have done a number of projects where we've tried that. Like, if you're a person, answer here. If you're an organization, answer here. And everybody puts their data, like nobody, it's a mess. So it's like, okay, that was worse than if we just went the generic route. So you don't, like if you, like Tim will get sort of, if you mention that, he'll be like, oh my God, everybody will get on it. He kind of hated it. So that doesn't work so well, but you could try, it might be a different kind of a network context and you could try. Okay, so how to do that is just make sure you're using a generic survey and be prepared to get a little bit of confusion and a little bit of fuzziness in your map. The next option is to make a list of organizations, a checkbox list of organizations in your survey. So this only works if you don't have, if you have a known organizational population. So you've got a list, like there's 30 organizations in this network of 300 people, or whatever finite number it is. But so you add the organizations into your checkbox list, and then you just ask people, how are you connected to these organizations, and let them answer as many as they want. That will get you a situation. It fixes the problem of having 3 people at an org but no org node. So you'll have, once you put the data into Kumu and you cluster on the organizations, then you will have dots for organizations, and you will have lines to the people who said they're connected to that organization. I'm going to I could show you an example map. This is going to ask you to a little bit extrapolate, but I know you're all probably fine with that. So this is clustering. In this instance, in this particular map, we clustered on issues, but it would be the same if you've any checkbox list that you make, you can cluster on. So let's just pretend that cluster is, or this node is the community building company, and this node is the clean energy corporation, and pretend you didn't see that pop up that just popped up if it was there. I mean, if it was quick enough to get to your screen. But so this is how it would look. There would be a node for each organization and a node for lines for the individuals attached to those organizations. Hang on. The drawbacks to this approach are, first of all, if your list is really long, it's going to take up a lot of space on your survey and just be clunky and ugly. And right now, I mean, you could theoretically use a drop down to save space, but the drop down only allows you to select one right now. We are in the next half year going to be updating the survey tool, so we have a little more flexibility with the actual input stuff. But right now, that would be long and ugly. The other problem with it is if you have a consistently changing survey organization population, so you're continually needing to add new organizations to your organization checkbox list in your survey, you'd have to keep going in and manually putting in another organization. And some of you might not have run across this yet, but currently in sumApp, you can't reorder your options easily. There's a workaround if you've got a tier 3 or 4 account, but it's really messy and it's like no fun. So you'd be having, you know, a nice alphabetized list of 20 organizations, and then you just start putting in A's and B's and C's in random order underneath. So not ideal, but doable, and it gets you the nice thing is it gets you those extra nodes, or the specific nodes for the organizations. Okay, so the next, let me just hang on, sorry. Oh, another shortcoming is that, let me go back to this screen share. Okay, can you guys see my screen? I can't see you, so, okay, thanks. So the other thing you can't do, that this approach doesn't give you, is it will give you a line from organization to person, or person to organization, but there will be no data about that connection, because it's just clustering. It's just, all it's saying is that this person selected this option. It's just a generic basic line with no information about the relationship in it. And you can't, sorry about that, you can't, there won't be lines from organization to organization. So all you're getting out of this is basically the relationships between from people to organizations. And you just have to know they have some kind of relationship to that organization, but it's not defined. And that's all you get with that kind of a view. So just make sure and I said there's no information in the node. So the next approach was sort of a revelation when we figured it out. I think Ryan might know about this, but I think most of the rest of us would be surprised. We were sort of surprised to realize we could do it this way. But the other approach is to simply do what I just said, have a checkbox list. So with that checkbox list, you're still gonna have the lack of, it's still going to be, the connection situation is still going to be the same. There won't be org to org connections, and there won't be information in the people to org connections. But what you can do is use a little trick in Kumu to put information about the organizations into the nodes. So I had a client once where I said, well, we can do this, and we can cluster and blah, 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 and it won't show this and it won't show that. And she's like, oh, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine. But then when we actually did the map, she's like, I need to have information about the organizations. And I was like, I thought we talked about this. But when we did all this big technical work around, and then we discovered later that we could have done this in a simpler way, which was, and I'll show you that way right now. So, so this is, again, this is the same project. I mean, this is that map I showed you a second ago, and we're clustering on this checkbox list here, but sorry. You're all, I'm sure, if you've been doing mapping, familiar with making different views. So we have, you know, this kind of view, that kind of view in Kumu to slice and dice and decorate and size the data in different ways. But most of us don't use multiple maps. Ryan, do you use multiple maps? You do, smart. So am I screen sharing? Okay, thank you. So usually we just use one because it's just, sorry. What makes one map different from another map in Kumu is that it's a different data set. So you can, if the data has the same headings, you can decorate the same way in your views, but you can combine maps and views differently in Kumu. But since it's a different data set, let me back up. You would think that, okay, so I've got the nodes in there, I'm gathering the nodes from sumApp and I'm putting the data into Kumu, and I could just go into this node. I could click on the node and go in and add data myself. So if I haven't gathered it from a survey, I could just add it myself. But since generally we're taking the JSON link and putting it straight into Kumu, so it's live linked, a live link data set in Kumu is read only. So you cannot change that data. Once the only way you can get data into Kumu is when you use the live link is through sumApp. So it's got to be asked and structured in sumApp in order to get it into the map. So that's why you can't just get, like, since we didn't ask information about the organizations explicitly in sumApp, there won't be any organizational information in those nodes to show you stuff about the organization. But since Kumu has, you can have multiple maps in a project, and since each map is being is working off of an entirely separate data set, you can have different data sources. So one source can be one map can be live linking data from sumApp, and a different map can be, you can use a Google Sheet or manual input or uploading spreadsheets, and it will be just a totally different data set. But if your nodes are named the same in both data sets, so let's say we've got an organization in map A called greater than the sum, and we've got an organization in map B called, or a node in map B called greater than the sum, then all of the data, and let's say you've got, you know, fields, okay, in map A, greater than the sum has fields 1, 2, and 3, and in map B, greater than the sum has fields 4, 5, and 6. So you've got different fields, but you've got the same label. The fields bleed over from one map to the other map. So 5 years ago had this experience, and it was really frustrating because we didn't want those fields to be in both maps. But anyway, what you can do is you can take your organization list, and I'm going to show you that right now. So here's where we have two maps. So one map is called home and one map is called cluster data. And in this map, we made a node for every issue that was in the other map. Oops, different map. I'll leave it. So these are just put in manually, and then we have, sorry. So Tim has an otherness and a, oh, never mind. I'll just, so in this, anyway, so he manually put in text for each node, and that now shows up. I thought I had myself all together this morning, totally didn't. So otherness and wordage. So he's got information now. So these fields aren't, otherness and wordage are not fields in the home map, but they're fields in the cluster map, and they have data in them. And so now if we go back to the home map and we actually click on them, we can see, oh, otherness and wordage has bled from map A to map B. So that's another approach. A thing to note, when I said you could, two different maps could have different data sources, that's true, but the data bleeding over thing only happens if you're manually managing map B. So if you fill a Google sheet, like Tim did this whole thing, he filled it, had a Google sheet, he made a little pop-up box so that you could add the Google sheet in the side panel, and was made it all fancy. And then he realized that when we added more data, it did not go into the other nodes. It just didn't. And not if he redid the links, and not if he emptied the trash. It was just like, didn't happen. So you'd have to feed the data into map B manually, perpetually. So you still have the same problems of this one's it's just higher maintenance if you have a organization population that's continuing to grow. I'm going to pause sharing, and I'm just going to, before I go into, stop. Stop sharing. Okay. I'm going to pause there. I kind of got a little bit caught up, and just want to, if anybody's got comments, or I'm tired of hearing my voice for a minute, so I would like us to hear somebody else's for a moment. Anybody comments, questions? Ryan?
I threw one thing into the chat that may have gotten lost, but I just wanted to explain a little bit, which was that one of the things with organizations is that many times their relationships are already visible. That they have, published lists of strategic partners or those kinds of things. And there's a lot more that you can do. I found myself doing a lot of manual, like adding information into the map to provide context. And as I put in the chat, a lot of cleaning up of organizations, because I think I used the exact same approach that Laura did of allowing people to write in their organization and then expecting that I would be able to match those puppies up. And that's not a good strategy if you have a lot of organizations, because it's everybody writes things slightly differently, even if it comes down to they put a space after or before or whatever. Those are so hard to clean out. So yeah. Just a couple of notes from experience, I guess. We have not done like a really good mashup of organizations and individuals, but we have a project that's kind of like primed for it, and it just hasn't moved forward yet. So we're still trying to figure that out.
Ryan, which method did you use? For the one you were just talking about.
The one that we're kind of primed. I mean, we were kind of going down the road of doing 2 surveys and kind of mashing them up in some manual way, essentially, because we couldn't separate out the questions as was suggested and that kind of thing. And it was kind of just as the dual nodes piece was, or the dual maps piece was coming together. And so I was like, well, let's just set that aside for a second, and maybe we'll fix that. But we haven't. What we ended up doing actually was we took a monster data set that we had been using to help build up that organizational info, and retooled it for purposes of social services available during the pandemic, and published it as just a directory map. And that's kind of as far as that social service agency has gotten right now. So it's they're pretty much all in response mode.
So Laura or Kate has a question. So the benefit of the second map that is the benefit of the second, yes, that you can add description. Yeah, that's the benefit of it. And you would still have to know your list of organizations in advance in order to put the checkbox, because sumApp doesn't have a way of saying, okay, is this an organization? Now I'm going to add it to the checkbox. It's not that sophisticated. So yeah, you'd still have to someone would have to be manually adding them to the list as long as they're coming in. Any other, sorry, Ryan, I jumped in right on top of you. I apologize for that. Jim, I'm just, yes, sorry.
But no way in Kumu clustering to be able to see the relationships between people at the same time that you're clustering.
Okay. If Tim were here, there's a thing called traversals.
I remember that. But
which is, I'm still wrapping my head around how we might use it. But what I understand it to be is if you have a node, you can, and there are like the nodes that are 1 degree out from them. So there's a node in the middle and then there's a circle of nodes around it. If you do a traversal, it will jump the node and make a line between all the other, node from node to node of the nodes that are attached to that one. I'm not sure. I mean, Ryan, have you ever worked with traversals? I'm not sure. Like, I think in a system map, anyway, Tim keeps saying, what if hey, should we try this? And then, we're on a walk and I'm like, yeah, that sounds like a really good idea. And then my head is busy and then I go away and then he looks at it and then he's like, I don't remember what I was thinking. And I'm like, yeah, I don't remember. I don't know what you were thinking. So, but it seems like there's still some potential there.
I'd just rather use your approach number 4.
Well, that's what we would hope you would rather do. Okay, is anybody who has not commented have any questions at the moment or comments before I jump into the 4th method? Okay, I'm gonna do Laura. Yeah.
It's a bit of a side question, but when you were like talking about like using a map B, I was also wondering, like, can you also use a map B if you wanna just have a map with a specific population out of the bigger map kind of thing?
You could do that. The problem with that, well, yes, that would be one way of doing that. You can also do that though with your views. So it depends on what the context is, but a thing to note about different maps is the whole map side panel is the same, like every view has that same side panel. A separate map gets you a separate side panel. So if you have a context where you want your side panel to be different, like which a subset would be that kind of a context. Like we had one client where it was a national network, but they had the state of Virginia was much more robust and they wanted their own map. And so that went into a different one so they could just be addressing Virginia and not have to look at all the views for the national population.
So for that, you could use like a second map within the same Kumu project.
Yeah, and you could even fill it with data from the same summit. You could just take
the same sumApp questions even.
Yeah, yep, the same data, so the same JSON link, just put it in map.
Okay. I might play with that then.
Well, we'll look forward to hearing what happens. Okay, so I'm going to jump into. Let me go back to my screen. So, with using the dual elements, what we get is, let me just show you this. Okay, so this is a project we're currently working on that Jim should go put his data into. that uses dual elements. So in this instance, we've got what you're normally what you're used to looking at. We've got people, we've got relationships. This is still a new map, so it's not all that filled in. I mean, it's partway filled in. And when we've got all this range of connectedness, aware of their work, acquaintance, generative interaction, and collaborators. So we can just see who's collaborating, et cetera. So we've got the usual setup for people, and let's see if we'll pick on Glenn. And you know, we've got the survey information showing up here as normal. So that would just be a standard person project. We also have we also mapped, in this instance, it's not organizations, but I consider an organization a collective of people doing something together. So it doesn't matter, you know, it could be a team, a school, an organization. These are working groups. So these are working groups within, the orange ones are working groups within the network, and the red ones are the 4 broader networks that this whole project, this is like a subset of these four broader global networks came together to create this particular working group. And I'm sorry, these are not working groups, these are work streams. So these are the labels are. If we're looking at, so the work streams, we have information, totally different information from what we had in the person surveys. You know, we have information about the work streams, and we haven't started, we will start getting at more questions about what do we want to know about the work streams, but this is the information we have of them right now. And then we have relationships from work stream to work stream. So the work stream relationships are we or they keep us or them informed about our activities, culture, and processes, or we exchange significant amounts of work stream information and content with them. So there's a lot of overlap in these work streams. And so which ones are actually sort of cross-pollinating what they're doing. And then we have overlapping work and areas of collaboration. So they're either sharing information about their work stream or they're working together at the level of the work streams. So we've got organizations and we've got people, and in these views, we're looking at them separately. But then we have, and this is the really fun part to me. Now we have, I'm going to remove people who haven't said they're attached to a work stream yet. But so these are the relationships of the persons to the work streams. So if we click on me and hover, we can see that there are 2 work streams down here that I'm actively engaged with and strongly engaged with. No, those are just 2 work streams that I'm interested in. And then there are work streams that I'm observing. And so for instance, like this one, I have a strong connection and I'm active in that one. Whereas this one, somebody put the wrong answer there. Oh, that's Suzanne's. Anyway, so we have 2 questions from persons to work streams, which is a weak, medium, or strong connection. And then what's your role in the work stream? So I'm an observer, I'm active in this work stream, I'm a fellow in this work stream, which is a specific role, I'm a convener, or I'm not connected by role. So now we can start to see the patterns of the involvement. Once we get more people in here, we can start to see the patterns of the involvement with the work streams, and as well as like who's active in a lot of them or who's just active in one but has a strong role. So anyway, that's getting at that differences. So I just showed you 3 different kinds of connection sets, 2 different surveys, and then now we can really get detailed in our digging into the whole thing. So aside from it costing more, it's and just having to know, you know, that you have to take 2. So to do this, you'll upgrade to a tier 4 account. You'll add another project so that you have at least 2 projects in your account. And then in your settings, you'll assign one of them as a person project and you'll assign another one as an organization project. And then in the organization one, it will allow you to link to the person project. So once you've got them linked, that then generates, another benefit of doing this is that then your org reps will only have one link. They'll get a link, and when they click on their link, they'll get an interface that looks like this. So here, under this label, this is Sam's, and Sam is answering, I make it clear that he's answering as a person and as an individual, and he goes through his profile and his personal connections, and then his relationships, his relationship to the different work streams. But then as an organizational rep, he has this other work area where now he inputs data as a representative of that work stream, and he puts in the information about that work stream, and then he puts in the relationships of that work stream to another work stream. Okay, so I'm gonna stop sharing and apologize. I feel like I was rather just all over the place in that one. I thought I was better prepared than I was, but it is what it is. So I'm just acknowledging that. And we've got 5 minutes. Want to see what, if anybody has more questions or comments, or just open it up and stop me talking again. Rainer.
One question. When I'm starting to have a tier 4 project, so I'll put there into data about organizations, and I would have to buy a second project for the personal data to combine those then. So in a tier 4 setting to use this, I would have, I'm obliged to have at least 2 projects to pay for.
Yeah.
That's right. Okay, so that's fine. Thanks.
Yeah, so it does cost more.
But it's elegant as far as I could see from the pictures right now.
Well, thank you. And it feels like, 3 hours of Ryan's hourly pay or something. I mean, I don't know what Ryan's paid, but as a consultant who gets paid as a consultant, a few hours of your time would pay for this and save many. I mean, it would be much cheaper to pay for sumApp than to Ryan do the data cleanup and or Tim or me or whomever that it takes to keep that other process going and alive. So so we hope it's worth it. Any other questions or comments? And Jim.
Just congratulations on pulling this together. People have been aching for this for so long, and you have created something that bridges that gap. So that's very cool.
Thank you. We're good at that. I may stutter when presenting things and get sped up, but we are good at solving data problems. Rainer, you had something to say?
And I like this wording, the work streams, and people connected to the work streams and different kinds of how do I contribute in different settings. That's what we have been looking for here at Munich, I guess. One bitter pill, our project will probably be ended with this year, but I'm intending to buy 2 tier 4 that go into next year, so that some people might work on that further on. So I'll come back to you for payment questions I still have then.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Ryan.
Throwing something in from Ariel's question here on the comprehensible map with increasing complexity, I would just encourage don't feel like you have to show everything on one map. That learning about how to use multiple maps and get into like this was a useful view what I usually end up doing in support of my sense makers is kind of like, I'm going to just take this data and like pull it apart in a bunch of different ways that look useful to me. And then we sit down and we talk about it, and we try not to get too focused on the big messy version. And I think I really like, Christine, you and Tim have done a great job of like breaking down the this view, this view, this view, and then in the weeds where everything is possible, and you can have the big messy map and poke around in it if you really know what you're doing. But 95+% of the people who are going to be looking at these maps aren't going to be able to manage the big complexity. And so I think that it's that was actually really revelatory for me, was your kind of basic breakdown of maps, so that we could you know, kind of find the different ways that people can get use out of this, and have them available to people without it, because I was often publishing just a bunch of different maps and sending out different links to kind of show people different pieces of the data, and then we could collectively kind of poke at the big messy map because I knew how to control it, you know, or a couple of people know how to control it, and go from there. And I think that that's a really valuable kind of evolution that you all have taken.
Yeah, thanks. I just opened up, I just shared my screen. Just, we try to make our views in the side panel go from really simple, so really introductory, to increasingly complex in the areas that people want to be looking at. But okay, we're at the top of the hour, so let's all unmute ourselves, and I'm going to, and I just stop sharing. Really appreciate everybody's attention and interest in the topic and in the tools. And if you want to stick around and ask more questions or talk some more, please do so. But let's unmute ourselves and just take a moment, and then I will count down from 3 to 1, and we'll just all sort of give each other a thank you and a bon voyage to have a wonderful day or evening, whichever it is, wherever you are. So, and I invite you to unmute yourself, but you don't have to, obviously. And I'm gonna just breathe for a moment, really quickly. And 3, 2, 1. Thank you all. Big
Wonderful.
hug.
Let's go.
Thanks for coming.
Gratitude.
Macht's es gut.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. It's
Thank
great.
you so much. It's great to have you.
I will see you at the beginners one.
Great. Look forward to it. Thanks for
Bye.
coming. Yeah.